Geoverse Part 3 To Live is Human by GeodesicDragon Chapter 2 Viewed from Afar. The honeymoon was one of the best 2 weeks of my life. Philadelphia really is a magnificent city. Even in the carriage on the way back to Ponyville, Twilight and I were discussing our next holiday there to see everything we missed. The carriage pulled up outside the library. The chauffeur opened the door for us and I got out first. Twilight went to step out, but I stopped her by picking her up and holding her in my arms. I turned to the chauffeur, who had just finished emptying our luggage, and took a bid pouch from my pocket. "Here you are, buddy," I said to him as I tossed the pouch in his direction. "You keep the change." He caught the pouch with a hoof, and his eyes lit up upon feeling the weight of it. "Thank you, sir," he replied, "and my congratulations to you both once again." I smiled and went over to the library door. "And now to carry my new wife over the threshold," I said proudly, as Twilight unlocked the door with her magic. I pushed the door open with a foot and carried her inside. I sat her down on the couch and kissed her forehead. "And now our new life can truly begin." She smiled and lay down on the couch, still exhausted from the trip back from Philadelphia. As I recovered our luggage from outside the library, I saw John jogging along the road. When he saw me, he came over. "Dude," he called, "you're back." "Yep," I replied. Twilight and I couldn't exactly stay in Philadelphia forever, despite us both wanting to. John put a hand up to my face. "Please," he begged, "spare me the sordid details." I grinned, and John removed his hand from my vision. "Pinky is holding a wedding after-party at Sugar Cube Corner later," he said. "You and Twilight are more than welcome to attend." I nodded. "Yeah, why not?" I shrugged. "It'll give us a chance to catch up with the gang. How are they, anyway?" John smiled. "They're doing great," he said. "Fluttershy has lots of new babies to take care of. Applejack and I are working on harvesting the last apple crop. Pinky has gone party mad. Rainbow Dash is still trying to perfect her maneuvers for her Wonderbolt's tryout. Rarity is working on a huge order for some pony named Sapphire Shores, and Ace is still building his new lab. I'm sure I'll hear all about their various exploits at the party," I said. "When is it?" "Tomorrow at 8, John replied as he jogged off. "See you there, and don't be late." "We won't be," I called after him. Taking the last bag inside, I closed the door gently and flopped onto the couch. Twilight climbed onto my chest and nuzzled my chin. "Home at last," she said. "Now, what was that about a party?" "Oh, that," I replied. "Pinky is holding a wedding after-party tomorrow at 8. Wanna go?" Twilight nodded and yawned. "Of course," she replied. "But let's get some rest first." And with those words she fell asleep, her head resting on mine. I soon followed suit, and the two of us lay there on the couch, locked in each other's embrace. "General, our scouts report a town to the northwest of our position," the soldier said. "But we're not sure who or what lives there." "What do you mean by not sure, Captain?" the general replied, narrowing his eyes. The captain rubbed the back of his head. "We didn't see any people, but we saw a lot of equine-looking creatures," he said hesitantly. "It could just be a farming community of some kind." The general sighed. "Prepare a drone and send it to the town," he said. "I want to know where the inhabitants are before we do anything else." "Yes, sir," the captain replied. He saluted stoically and ran out of the room, barking orders as he went. The general turned around in his chair and looked out the window of his tent. The portal still stood in the middle of the clearing, surrounded by armed soldiers, all of whom were looking around nervously, their fingers poised over the triggers of their weapons. As he watched, a small robot took off from a nearby tent and headed in the direction of the town. He smiled as he watched it leave and leaned back in his chair. "Soon we'll have some answers," he said to himself, "and then we'll find out what that crackpot doctor is really up to." I woke up to find Twilight sprawled across my chest, deep in slumber. Her chest rose and fell with each breath, and a tiny smile was fixed across her lips. I looked at the clock. It read 7:30 p.m. "Wah!" I said quietly. "I guess we were more tired than we originally thought." I gently hoisted Twilight off me and laid her on the couch, covering her with my jacket. I then crossed over to the window. As I reached for the cord to open the blinds, I caught a glimpse of a small robot working its way around town. It hovered between buildings and darted down alleyways as the camera mounted on it spun around rapidly. I closed the blinds and went upstairs to have a shower. I came down to find Twilight looking out the window. I stood by her side as she pointed at the robot, which was still whizzing around Ponyville at a high rate of speed. "Why is Ace still using his birds?" she asked. "Surely he doesn't have a need to now that he's in Equestria?" I shrugged. "Honestly," I replied, "I don't know. Now come on, we're going to be late for this party." Twilight looked at the clock and gasped. "Let me get a quick shower first," she called as she ran upstairs. I laughed and sat on the couch. My train of thought took me back to the robot. The more I thought of it, the more I realized it didn't look anything like one of Ace's creations. Maybe it's a new model, I thought. You know what he's like. He'd tell you about his new inventions. I shook these thoughts out of my head as Twilight came back downstairs, looking fresh as a daisy. I opened the door and put her on my shoulders. "Time for a party," I said. "Shall we get going?" Twilight nodded and we left the library, the door locking behind us. "I seriously cannot believe he just asked us that," I seized, throwing the contents of my glass down my neck. "What business is it of his what we get up to behind closed doors?" Twilight took my hand in a hoof and squeezed it, while John was doing his utmost to suppress a laugh. "Relax," he said. "I don't think Ace meant to cause offense." I groaned. "I know," I exhaled sharply. "It's just, I wasn't expecting that subject to be brought up, at least not for a while." "What subject?" asked Twilight. "Folds?" I coughed. "Yeah," I said flatly. "Folds." I took another round of punch from the bowl and drank it in one go. The atmosphere around the table was as thick as treacle. "I guess I should go talk to him," I said eventually. "Show him I'm not pissed off about what he asked. Besides, I need to talk to him about something else as well." I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand and went across the room. Ace was standing with Pinkie Pie and had a solemn expression on his face. As I approached, Pinkie grabbed him by the hand and swept him onto the dance floor. I decided not to butt in and returned to the punch bowl. "That was quick," John said, raising an eyebrow. "He was busy," I replied, nodding my head towards the two of them enjoying a dance. "I'll talk to him later." I sat with Twilight and put an arm around her. "You and I need to talk," I said, "about what Ace mentioned." Her eyes widened as she took a look at me. "Not now, though," I said with a sigh, "but as soon as we get home we are going to discuss this." Twilight nodded and put her head in my lap. As I stroked her mane, I felt an all-too-familiar feeling wash over me. My nerves were on alert again. As the footage was played back, the General sat in his chair with a puzzled look on his face. "Sentient horses." He repeated the words again and again, trying to comprehend what he was saying. The captain nodded. "I couldn't believe it either, sir," he said, unable to keep the surprise out of his voice. "But the evidence is undeniable. I actually took the drone around the town twice, just in case I was seeing things." The two of them sat in silence as the playback continued. Suddenly, the General sat upright in his chair and pointed at the screen. The picture showed a human leaving a structure built into a tree, with one of the creatures at his side. "Pause! What's that right there?" he yelled, moving closer to the screen. "Is that a human?" The captain peered at the screen. "It would certainly seem that way, sir," he replied. He studied the image carefully. "I don't see any obvious signs of coercion." The general raised an eyebrow. "Coercion?" he asked. "From the looks of things, that man appears to be as happy as Larry." He leaned back in his chair. "The Prime Minister was clearly overreacting when he called us in," he said slowly. "I will report to him that these creatures are not a threat, and simply wish to be left in peace." The captain nodded. "But first," the general said, "I want to talk to that man." "Yes, sir." The captain saluted. "We'll bring him in for you." As the captain left the room hurriedly, the general stood up and walked over to the television. He leaned close to the still footage on the screen. "Whoever you are," he said quietly, "I hope you're up for answering a few questions." He brought his face back from the screen. "Because your answers will decide the fate of this world."